Hey, Jason and Kevin here, coming at you again with another episode of the Cyber Distortion Podcast. In this episode, titled A Manager's Perspective on Cybersecurity, our goal is to give you insights into what concerns managers most. So, if you're a current manager, an aspiring manager, or a student interested in managing your own team someday, you do not want to miss this episode.
We're going to also be joined today by a special guest, a VP in the auto industry, giving us real-world perspectives from the mind of a manager. So join us as we pry into this seasoned professional's brain and try to unravel all the madness that resides there.
So let's clear the noise, add some fidelity. Let's learn something. Let's go. Episode 3, A Manager's Perspective on Cybersecurity.
Welcome to the Cyber Distortion Podcast. We've got a very special guest tonight, a VP, Mr. Eric Lough from FCP Euro. He's in the automotive industry. We teased it last night. And he's here to tell you a little bit about his background, what he does, and who he is.
Kevin, thanks so much for the intro. Really just enjoying being here, and can't wait to what we dive into. So, as you mentioned, I'm Eric Lough. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for FCP Euro. We're what's called a 1P e-commerce marketplace in the automotive aftermarket. We specialize in selling and distributing parts for European vehicles. So for 9 major European makes. Been in the automotive aftermarket for about 15 years. I feel like I'm dating myself every time I say that. But really got my start, just kind of kicking tires, so to speak, in data acquisition. I talk about data acquisition. We're talking about actual, just raw, clunky data in the automotive aftermarket for companies such as WHI Solutions, and kind of moved on to eBay Motors. Worked there for a little while, and said after 7 years, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go do the startup life. And was nothing like the Facebook movie. Wasn't in Palo Alto swinging from chimneys and anything like that. It was a grind, but learned a lot and had a lot of fun. And now I'm at FCP Euro trying to make everyone who drives a European car, their experience that much better.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, it is really great to have you on the podcast. We appreciate you taking time out to join us on this thing. We really think that there's a lot of exciting information to share on the podcast that we're, bringing out to the public. And this podcast, I think, is going to be a lot of fun because it's this age-old question of, solving business problems as a manager. And the one in particular that we're trying to address is, how do managers approach the challenges of cybersecurity? And so it's going to be great to hear from you and from your perspective about, thinking about the business and saving the business and protecting the business and how cybersecurity affects that. And as a manager, what are those challenging things that concern you all the time with this topic? So we're really excited about it.
I love that you said, I'm going to date myself with 15 years. Dude.
Well, it's not getting better. It's not going up. It's just going the other way.
Hey, it is just a few more gray hairs from the last time when we saw you.
Well, though. They're into the bottom.
It's okay.
Well, look, let's jump right into this thing. Eric, we're going to hit you with a few Q&A questions and just kind of get the juices flowing and get some of that brain knowledge from you that Kevin had referred to in our earlier discussions when we did our intro. So, we heard that cybersecurity professionals are in high demand. And in fact, there's over 500,000 jobs open in the space today. As a manager, are you finding it difficult to field a team of qualified personnel who can speak to the issues that we're seeing today with cybersecurity and kind of feel good about what they can offer to protect your company?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a question that's got parity with a lot of other highly skilled, highly specialized roles that people who leave, kind of secondary education are not really teed up to go into the workforce and make a substantial impact, right? So when you look at these roles and people coming out of college and even with master's degrees, great, they've got all the technical knowledge, but there's always those human skills, those soft skills, so to speak, of like having time in the job and everything that lives between the fold and understanding what that means, because the margin for error and the ability to kind of mess up in cybersecurity just doesn't exist, especially at a company that's doing several $100 million annually, if not billions of dollars in revenue. So like the damage to ROI there is substantial. So I think absolutely, yeah, we're struggling. I think I can imagine a lot of other companies are struggling. They're probably similar like product management roles. They're in high demand. They pay a ton of money. And so I think that's why you either see people spending a lot of time and money to get the right people in the door, if they can even find them, or contracting it out to kind of third-party vendors to take on that responsibility within the organization.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and that, you made a very good point that I think it's important for our listeners and viewers to hear again, and that is, especially for our viewers who are aspiring to get into the field of cybersecurity, and that is, you know, it takes more than just taking a few classes or getting a certification and being able to step in and be a real value to an organization. There's a lot of effort that you have to put into understanding the organization and that organization's risks and in the business, right? The business as a whole. So, and not to deter people from wanting to get into the field, they should very much get in the field, as the earlier statement was, you know, 500,000 open jobs in the field available today. My point is that, as you stated it, these are not easy jobs to have, right? They require a lot of weight on your shoulders. And so, be aware that this is, has its rewards, but it also has its risks associated with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think.
Yeah, sorry, no doubt about that. Oh, sorry. Okay, I was just gonna throw in. You know, we hear this statement all the time in security is, you know, understanding it, you have to know so many different areas to be able to cover the world of cybersecurity. And one of the common phrases they say when you're studying for the CISSP is that the data is a mile wide and a couple inches deep, which I would say that's complete BS, because it's a mile wide and about 2 miles deep too, because there's so many different areas that just keep going of information that you have.
Yeah, and what I was thinking about before, and Jason, you kind of sparked the thought here is, you know, I think like this goes across many different roles, but like we don't have a strong mentorship program or ecosystem for people to take that baby step out of secondary education into being deeply proficient in those roles. So I think always with like an airline pilot, you don't just stick them in like a commercial jumbo jet after coming out of like flight school, right? Like there's a time to tee up and like you're ready for taking on that challenge. But yeah, we're like, hey, why don't you just take the entire security of our company and all its revenue that's packed behind it, and we'll put it in your, like, no, of course not, right? But so I think there's probably a couple paths forward out of education to try and figure out what that journey looks like. And I think there's some people get lucky and have a great mentor, and some people just have to figure it out the hard way. And then there's probably some people that kind of fall through the cracks there.
Question 2.
All right, Eric, let's go with another question here. You know, we hear all the time that one of the biggest challenges for IT folks or security folks are aligning with executive management or their board. It's an age-old issue. You know, how do you get the executive management team to understand and appreciate the value or the importance in cybersecurity? And oftentimes that's not easy to do, and it can be for a variety of reasons, really. I mean, there's budget constraints, there's differing opinions on what's the top priority for the business. You know, in some cases, it's even as bad as you got old school mentality in the business still, and old ways of thinking is, you know, I can say I've been in companies before where the thought process was, oh, we'll just deal with that problem when it happens, which really doesn't work well in cybersecurity. So what are your thoughts on this? If you could offer some advice to the listeners on, how you could best go about trying to convey the importance of this to management, whether it be executive management or your board of directors, what would you say to them?
That's a really, really good question, because there's a couple of things that kind of fall in that vein. And I would say, if giving advice and just my experience, there's a couple, I think, just pillars of that conversation that need to happen. And I think it's first, know your audience and know your organization. What does the organization really care about? There are some organizations, to your point, that are just from an older era of thinking, and it's about return on investment, and that's it. There's some organizations that are very grounded and anchored in culture. So first of all, just understand what your organization really cares about, because that's going to be a reflection of senior leadership. And once you understand that, I think just finding the common denominator is what's really going to move the conversation forward. And I can tell you, for our organization, really we care about our people, our culture, and our community, and all the decisions we make kind of anchor around that. And when I look at all of that, it really comes down to an investment, and I think that's the common denominator. We have an organization that we are investing into, and so when I look at how you would approach that conversation with senior leadership, we talk about essentially return on investment, right, when you're investing, but no one ever talks about return on loss, right, because it's a loss. But when I think about cybersecurity, I think about, good point. That's a potential loss. Like, if I'm going to invest my money in a 401k or in a stock, I'm going to do everything I can to prevent from losing money when that happens. So why, as a senior leader, would I not protect this investment, right? So it's kind of crazy to me that senior leadership would say, no, that's a cost center. We can't invest in that. I'm like, no, that's a loss prevention center is what that is. So,
well, at the end of the day, we're kind of an insurance policy, right? I mean, that's what you're paying for. You're paying for the expertise to protect your crown jewels, which is basically your sensitive data and your employees.
I think what I was going to say is, to go along with that, the thinking about it as protecting yourself from a loss, right? Not so you don't have to take on a loss. The issue is that loss to some people can lead to bankruptcy, or that loss to some people can be minimal. Right? Yeah. Right. The variable of loss could be enormous, or it could be very small. It depends on what protections and what things you're putting in place to create that security policy to help you, so that your loss isn't something like unemployment and bankruptcy, right?
I think it's like throwing a stone in the water, right? Oh, it's just a stone, but once that stone hits the water, that ripple, that goes forever.
Yeah, definitely.
Kevin, you mentioned something within the question that I wanted to speak to. I thought was interesting. Was I think a lot of companies do look at it as a reactive approach. We'll handle it when it happens, but when it happens, it is far, far too late. Like, the repercussions of trying to fix that. And now let's just talk the technical aspect. Let's talk about the impact to your customers and to the business, to the reputation and the service you provide. Like, to recover from that is such an uphill battle. It's like when you're fraud, right? When your credit card gets stolen, you don't think about it until it happens, and then it gets stolen, and the pain in the butt it is, or when your identity is stolen, to get that restored and talk to the credit bureaus, like, that's a challenge. So why wouldn't we protect that upstream and think of that as a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of times, and this is with so many aspects of life, not just cybersecurity, but people are just reactive beings in nature. We're not, let's plan for the worst, just in case type people, especially when it costs money. And when you kind of cross that into the business, that's the challenge that IT faces, is like, okay, we can invest in all these controls to help protect the data or protect our well-being as a company. But, at the end of the day, you have to trust that what we're saying is true. This risk is real. And I think that's kind of what you're selling is we can wait and be reactive, or we can put the controls in place now and try to be proactive and get ahead of this. And that's what you're trying to sell to management. It's not an easy sell.
Question 3. Okay, Eric, how important do you feel it is to have someone that has information security and risk management expertise actually on the board, right? Because what we find is that in executive management, most time, to your point, it's the last thing that they want to have to worry about, right? They're focused on running the business. But executive management has to report to the board. And if you had someone on the board, with this experience, would that make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the board, absolutely an advocate. I think traditional, boards are looking at the business, and at the end of the day, it's revenue, it's margin and EBITDA, right? So, and there's so many things that get packed in between those lines that make that up. And I don't think that cybersecurity is traditionally one that that kind of falls in there. It's like, oh, this internet thing will never last. Well, okay, sure. It's here, right? It's real, and the business is founded off of it. I can tell you in the automotive aftermarket, we're going to do about $34 billion in revenue just in e-commerce, right? Online. So imagine the risk that's exposed there. And think about companies like Google and the amount of attacks they get on a daily basis and that no one knows about, right? So I think there's an awareness piece to it. So I think at the board level, it's definitely an interesting topic. I'd have to say I haven't seen that quite a bit. I can tell you at our organization, yes, absolutely, we have someone at our executive level that speaks on our behalf of cybersecurity and drives that initiative. And I think it's critical. Kevin, you mentioned insurance before. Most insurance companies now, for e-commerce companies, will not even insure you or look at you if you do not have some really rock solid cybersecurity policy. So insurance companies are getting very hit to this very, very quickly as well. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. Question 4.
So as a manager, I mean, obviously, Jason and we're going to go to the executives in the company and say, hey, look, cyber insurance is a smart decision. It's a good investment, right? Cyber insurance these days is not cheap, and it's not going down. It's trending up. So as we continue to hear more and more about these attacks, malware and ransomware attacks, almost, heck, if not weekly, sometimes daily, those premiums are just going to continue to rise. So from a managerial standpoint, what are your thoughts on the factors that would lead you to or to not consider cyber insurance or a cyber insurance policy?
It's a good question. So I would say, if I were in an organization, if I were back in startup days, right, and I would look at that, it'd be risk versus reward, right? If I have a company that doesn't have a lot of infrastructure yet, we're very, very new, a impact to the business could be recovered fairly easy, right? There's probably not a reward versus the cost and the output for that. But I don't think that honeymoon phase lasts very long. I think you ramp that up pretty quickly. And when you get to a point of having a minimum viable product with customers on it, I think it's even more critical at that point than it is as a more established company, because one instance can just put that dream and that vision, just snub it out for you. So, I think those are probably some of the decisions I would expect. Honestly, some of the riders, we look at policies in the grand scheme of things of what people spend on travel and corporate expenses. Sometimes it's expensive, but it's in the totality, it's not very, very much to protect all the upside of the business. So, when I look at cybersecurity, it's like, wouldn't you put insurance on the building if someone slipped at the front door and broke their leg? Like, wouldn't you have insurance to cover that? Like, why wouldn't you have when the infrastructure is going to fall and break its leg, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to that point, right? I as you were talking, I thought of the word implosion, and why? And it's because what we call insider threat, your employees, is one of the biggest risk factors you have to having a breach. And that's a fact, right? However many employees you have, that's that times 1 or 2 hackers trying to get in your organization, or however many people are trying to get in, right? They're doing phishing attempts against all of those people. And it just takes one to make a mistake, give away some credentials, and now they have, a potential avenue into your organization. And to your point, especially, right? When it's a new organization, a startup phase, and you're trying to make things happen, you're trying to get things put together, it is very hard to focus on all of those things you need to do to keep yourself safe. But there is a time where that will cut over. And if you're looking on applying cybersecurity insurance to your organization, they are going to look to see that you have policies and procedures in place that protect your insider threat from creating a risk that will cost them more money. Right. So all of those things come to play when you're looking at cyber insurance. So it was a very good point making that. And so
that's an interesting point you just made, because, you know, it's almost as if today you've got to prove yourself so worthy of being able to even purchase the cyber insurance that you can almost talk yourself out of buying it. Because by the time you go through the exercise, you're like, God, I've got this control in place. I've got that control in place. I got my user awareness going over here. I've got email protection. I've got next generation firewalls, EDRs. Maybe I don't need the cyber insurance at the end of the day, and I can save that money. But you know, in the end, it really does. It comes down to risk versus reward, and I think that changes based on the size of the company. You know, are you a global company? Are you dealing with laws and regulations that impact PII? God forbid, should that get in the wrong hands and you could get sued for that. You know, there's just so many factors that play into it.
Question 5. So we talked about how we approach looking at business, and as security professionals, you know, employees and the business are important, and we have to focus around that. Well, from a security professional standpoint, you know, we have this holy grail of understanding, and this holy grail of understanding is derived from what we call the CIA triad, and that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And every decision that's made, every thought that's made is derived from first thinking about those 3 aspects of the business. Are we making things sure that the data is confidential? Are we making sure that we're providing the integrity that we expect our customers expect of us and our employees expect of us? And are we providing the right amount of availability in all senses of the word, either to our employees by the services we give them, or to our customers from the products and services that we provide them? And so everything is around the CIA triad. When we think about those decisions, it does become a balance, and a balance between protection and operational efficiency. Because if we only focus around all of the things that we really want to do as security professionals to keep our business safe, without any regard to the cost or the weight that it adds into the organization to produce the goods and services that we have to produce, then we're not going to be a successful business and we'll be done, right? But then yet on the other side, if we don't think enough about the right protections because it costs too much or it's going to add another layer of processes and procedures, then we might not have the right protections in place. And so it's always this balance. And that's one thing that we try to focus on. So, you know.
So let's take that into the next question here, Jason, because that's a good segue. You know, when you're thinking about IT controls, cybersecurity controls, and trying to get management and IT on the same page, do you find that it's difficult to balance these controls with the operational aspect of the business from a managerial standpoint? I mean, because a lot of these things can be somewhat disruptive.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like a couple vectors there that are going through my mind. You know, when we sit as a leadership team together, and you know, we always come into each year with a strategy, with our objectives, right? And we're looking at those, and we have to ask ourselves, okay, what are the revenue generating strategies? What are the cost centers? And then when we look at those cost centers, we look at them, are they true cost centers, or are they protections for the business, right? They do return value in some way. They're just always a little bit disconnected from kind of the source and the endpoint. So I think coming in with solid strategies and knowing a good balance of immediate revenue generating opportunities and opportunities that are protecting the business and protecting that revenue, right? I think that's a good winning formula for any organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. Like user awareness training and things like that.
Yeah, it's like I kind of go back to like HR and insurance, right? When I look at like cybersecurity, I don't mean to like put it in like that same bucket, right? But it's really like, HR, you're protecting that investment. You're protecting the people. Without the people, you've got an empty building just doing nothing, right? And you wouldn't even have a need for cybersecurity if you didn't even have the people, right? So it's like having the insurance, right? Having cybersecurity. I don't think one really functions well without the other. And I'll say this too, like, it's a balance. And I always tell all the people that work with me or for me, I'll say, hey, I see this. Can we do this? They say, yeah, no, I'll go do this. I'm like, you don't have to go completely the other way, right? There's a balance. You always got to find walk that middle line. And when I look at companies that are $20 million in revenue, let's say, their cybersecurity needs are extremely different from a $100 million company. Why? Because there's less eyeballs on them. You have not risen to the level of, you haven't gotten out of the pond yet for anyone to want to go fishing for you. So it's kind of, I think you do everything kind of like lockstep, right? We're $20 million. We need this. Okay. Now we're $50 million. Now we need this. We're $100 million. Now we need this, right? You don't need the $100 million service for a $20 million company. So I think it's having good visibility and clarity around knowing what you need and when you need it. And I think that's where a lot of the IT security firms bring a tremendous value, because they just have those years of experience of like, a good firm, I could sell you this, but you really need this, but I'll be here when you're ready for that.
Question 6. All right. So this question is specifically around the auto care industry. And so, in 2020, the Auto Care Association worked hard to get the Automotive Aftermarket recognized by the federal government as critical infrastructure. And if you remember, when the pandemic hit in 2020, one of the key factors that was determined in how vaccines would roll out and what type of concessions would be made for industries was centered around the designation of what is critical infrastructure and what is not. So when we look now back and look at the attacks that have happened since 2020 to today, and even the attacks that happened last year that were on critical infrastructure systems, it starts to become concerning that the impact of industries that are marked as critical infrastructure, when an attack happens, that how that can affect not just your organizations, but can affect many individuals downstream. So what's your take on what attacks and even multiple attacks happening to the automotive aftermarket as a critical infrastructure industry, what that might do to our industry?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and something that keeps me scared all the time, admittedly. So, it's
that's one that keeps you up at night.
There's a lot of thoughts out, and I would start my thoughts with kind of the pebble in the pond, right? You throw it, and the ripple effect is cascades, and there's different levels and tiers of it too. And it's funny when people always ask me what I do. In the automotive aftermarket, they automatically think I fix cars for a living or do something like that. And they don't realize the massive, $341 billion, and that's just light duty vehicles business that industry is. I think it makes up like 2% or 2.5% of GDP. It's huge. It's like 4.5 million people it employs. Right. And what they don't realize is every car they pass on the road needs brakes and it needs filters, needs oil. Right? It's a massive industry. But what they don't seem to realize, or I think a lot of people forget, is that 18-wheeler that they passed. What is that vehicle carrying, right? That garbage truck they passed, that snowplow, that bus, right? Thinking back to, let's just go back to the turn of the century, right? Like not this past one, but the one before that. When you didn't have, like, how did you? Communities were small, they were tight knit. Like you didn't get the services and supplies you needed, and right now we have infrastructure, and not only transportation and mobility, but the infrastructure behind that. The amount of logistics that goes into just even getting a truck filled from a distribution center, the amount of automation there is just, it's mind blowing. So when I look at cybersecurity, that's what keeps me up at night, because I think of just one massive attack, you're shutting down supply chain logistics. And what does that look like for me as a consumer? well, maybe my child can't get to school. I go to the grocery store and there are no groceries there, right? I try and order something off Amazon and I can't get it the next day. Heaven forbid.
Oh my God.
I didn't get it in 3 days. It's awful. But it's funny, the amount of stuff that just really trickles and disseminates down. And I think some of it is not immediate. I think that there's some instances where if there was an issue, right, it would take a little bit for that to disseminate out. And there are some that are just extremely impactful right away. And I will say I have some colleagues and friends that work in the infrastructure industry around water treatment and things like that. And there's a lot of valves and things that control. I think California a few years ago had this happen. Someone hacked into the state of California, once some of the city's water treatment plants and just shut it down. I'm like, imagine that. Literal, backing up that also can happen, in the logistic and distribution part of our industry. So this definitely keeps me up at night because I also don't think we have put enough protection. We're growing, I think, faster than we can protect what we're building.
So let's recap. In question 1, difficulty fielding a team of cybersecurity experts, we mentioned margin of error in cybersecurity does not exist and is a huge weight on your shoulders. Qualified, experienced personnel is important and in high demand, and we need strong mentorship programs to help guide new cybersecurity professionals. In question 2, recommendations to get senior leadership to appreciate importance of cybersecurity, we stated, understand what your organization cares about to determine how to talk to senior leadership. Cybersecurity is a loss prevention center, and a cyber attack leads to a loss, and organizations should invest to protect the loss. In question 3, how important is information security expertise on the board? We stated, critical to have cybersecurity understanding at executive or board level. Executive level awareness is important because the automotive aftermarket represents about $34 billion at risk in e-commerce sales. And cybersecurity insurance will require a good cyber program to be in place. In question 4, what factors to consider regarding cyber insurance? We stated, wouldn't you want to protect your systems from injury that could lead to loss? Nothing is 100%. With insider threat being the number one threat to your business, insurance could be a good safety net. And the balance of having insurance and the level of insurance comes down to risk versus reward. In question 5, difficulty in aligning security with business priorities, we stated, the CIA triad is the basis for decision making by security professionals: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You must have a good balance of protection and operational returns. And you don't need a $100 million solution for a $20 million company. And in question 6, impact of attacks on auto care industry as deemed critical infrastructure. We stated, one massive attack can shut down the supply chain, impacting millions of people. There will be residual effects which would slowly shut down depending organizations. And we are growing faster than we can protect what we are building. Well, Eric, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for being on this show. Hopefully we can have you back again. As Kevin said earlier, we're going a little bit longer than we planned on, and that's because the conversation was just so much of fun having with you, and your knowledge of that managerial concerns being real, right? We heard it firsthand from someone in the automotive aftermarket industry, and someone who has gotten a lot of experience with managing people, and so the information you gave us is invaluable, and I think our audience will be appreciative of hearing that from someone real, right? Not just reading it in a book or getting it secondhand. So we really appreciate that, and we want to thank you for being on the show.
Oh, pleasure's all mine, guys.
Thank you, Eric. We really appreciate it.
Had such a good time. We blew through the time. It was fantastic, and I will absolutely, if you will have me, would love to do another episode with you guys.
Very good, yeah.
Well, hey, it was fun and enlightening for me. I know. Hopefully some of this was enlightening for you as well.
So, viewers, listeners, we want to join you, ask you to join us next time. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll have a lot more really fun episodes like this to coming your way soon. And so, look forward to talking to you guys and having you hear us again. See you next time.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody. Hello, everyone. If you enjoyed the podcast today, I'm excited to share with you that you can now listen to us on all of these major streaming platforms. Also, if you learned anything from the conversation today, please share this episode with your friends, family, and colleagues. The more of this knowledge we can share, the more cybersecure we all become. I'd say like, subscribe, and all of that jazz, but hey, you're not morons. You know that. I will leave you with some words of wisdom, though, from the former director of the FBI, Mr. Robert S. Mueller III. He said there are only two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be hacked. You guys be safe, remain diligent, and take care.